Mary Berry is the queen of cakes and a national treasure.
I'd go for that.
I'm a little bit worried of what he's going to delve into.
She's been on television for 4 decades and she's at the top of her game.
I bet he asked me about Bake Off, and do I love Bake Off? I really do. It's delicious.
Mary's had an extraordinary life. She was a real trailblazer for female chefs.
A good idea is to use the old hay box method.
The most difficult part of this interview will definitely be surrounding the death of her son at 19 in a road accident.
We miss William enormously. I'd love him to walk in the room right now.
I'm not buying all this nice Mary Berry stuff. I think it's going to be quite a frisky night.
Piers, this is very, very exciting to come on your show, and please be very gentle with me.
Mary Berry, I've had lots of big stars on this show. I don't think I've ever had a goddess like you, somebody at the top of their game. How do you feel about this national treasure status that you've now suddenly got?
Well, I feel just the same inside, but I'm very lucky and I'm very spoiled.
For someone like me who's never even baked a potato, why is Britain so mad about baking?
I think because the programme, The Great British Bake Off, is very simple and it's very, very honest, and all the bakers are amateurs. They've never baked professionally. They've never been in a tea shop even cooking cakes. So they're like the girl or the boy next door.
Now, most of the people we interviewed for the programme said that it's your disappointment on Bake Off that the contestants fear the most. One journalist described your devastatingly withering look of disappointment as, quotes, able to instantly reduce any human being alive to a pile of quivering ash.
I think that's a bit tough.
Imagine just for a moment, I've just baked a cake, and it's one of the worst
I'm imagining it, because you wouldn't have baked a cake, would you?
Well, I wouldn't have a clue. But imagine that I had. Let's suspend all disbelief for a moment.
Yeah.
And you're looking at it, and it's the worst cake you've ever seen, and then you taste it, and it's even more diabolical. Give me that look of disapproval. Wow. It's wounding.
I can usually find something nice, because one doesn't want to put people off cooking and baking. You want to tell them where they've gone wrong and encourage them to do better.
Now, Mary, in a recent list of best-dressed people over 50, you came second only to Dame Helen Mirren. You beat Barack Obama, David Bowie and the Queen. How does it feel to be a style icon for the older generation?
Must have been on a very good day. Actually, because of the Bake Off, I think there's often, with the masterclasses, I suppose there must be about 18 lots of outfits, and actually I quite enjoy choosing them. But I've got one or two things that are important to me because I'm old. I make quite sure I have a sleeve, so we don't see these wobbly bits here. And
don't you also keep them cut so that you don't get the flour on? Is that right?
A little bit back, yes. Yeah. And I don't like it too low, and definitely not too short.
Now, tell me about the infamous floral bomber jacket. There we are. I mean, that is sensational.
And the reason why I bought that, Piers, was because I could get lots of jumpers underneath, because we film when it's very cold down in Somerset.
And do you remember what you paid for it?
I think it was something like £29 or something.
$29.99. Apparently it's now selling for £200 on eBay after you wore it. Mary, let's take a look at how you've tempted the nation with your cooking for over 40 years.
I'd go for that.
A splash of sweetness.
It's delicious, absolutely delicious.
Thank you.
A generous measure of honesty.
Forgive me being rude, but it looks a bit like a stuffed olive.
And lashings of experience has made Mary Berry the queen of British baking.
Mary's a real proper cook. And wow, she's got the whole nation interested in baking.
There'll certainly be through to the next round. Possibly even star baker. Well done, Mary.
Thank you.
I love the spices. It's delicious.
For the last 4 years, Mary's been judging the creations of amateur bakers on the Great British Bake Off.
Most impressive. You've got there.
Yeah, well done.
Yeah.
But Mary has been sharing the secrets of the perfect bake with her TV audience over a remarkable 40 years.
I'm making a Somerset apple cake.
And is the country's longest-serving television cook.
bland and it's very firm.
What's different about Mary? She's been around for so long. She's seen all the others away.
It's like Aladdin's cave, isn't it?
Isn't it?
Her knowledge is just frightening.
Don't use milk because it hasn't quite sticky enough.
There is no mistakes with Mary. Mary gets it right.
She was the original domestic goddess.
I've got a nice recipe for doing it using stout, and it gives it a nice full-bodied flavour.
Mary's renowned for good, honest home cooking and everything what this country stands for.
In 1997, Mary had her own series on daytime television.
It's better to put the sides on first. So I'm going to spread it round.
But it was to be her last for nearly 15 years. Television started to become dominated by a new wave of male chefs.
Give me 2 tartare in 4 minutes.
Your attitude stinks.
Some of them try to be too clever. Some of them try to shout.
Too many TV cooks are all about the image, the ego, and that doesn't come across with Mary.
But in 2010, primetime television came calling for Mary with the offer of a new baking show.
When they're looking for presenters for these shows, they asked everyone who is the best household name for baking, and everybody said Mary Berry.
I remember the first time that I saw her screen test, and her warmth, her expertise just lit up the screen, and it literally from that moment we knew that we had to have Mary on the show.
She knows all about cakes, there's no one better. But she wasn't an expert on bread, so she said, we want to get a bread expert in as well.
And I thought, a bit of rough from the northwest with Queen Mary Berry. How's that going to work? I don't get it. How wrong was I?
And that bit of rough was Paul Hollywood.
How about that? So you can put all that in now. It will... Look at it. I'll get my own back.
Well, Mary likes to be working with a handsome man, so Paul Hollywood fits the bill.
I'm probably the only one in the country that can get away saying the things that I do to Mary Berry. It's almost mother-son on camera.
For you to say they're all looking pretty good...
Oh, don't start, Mary.
People think that Mary's the kinder judge and Paul is the harsher judge, but it's Mary's disappointment that people fear the most.
I don't like it.
She wants to know that she's helping by saying, you have a soggy bottom.
Mary and the show have become a TV phenomenon.
9 million viewers. Doesn't get any better than that, does it, really?
What? For a baking programme?
Now in her late 70s, when 90% of the population have given up their jobs, Mary Berry has become one of the most famous faces in Britain.
It has become complete Berry mania.
We did a thing where I had to judge pies and cakes, I think. And Mary Berry walked out in front of 25,000 people and it went insane. It was like the Rolling Stones walking out on stage. And it's Mary Berry with a cake. It's rock and roll.
When you hear the phrase Berry mania, we're trying to think of another celebrity who became this famous in their mid-70s, and the only one we could think of was the Pope. It's just you and Pope Francis. I mean, it is crazy, isn't it, in a certain way?
Well, I'm enjoying it.
Is it true you have to have security guards now when you attend public events?
If it's the BBC Good Food Fair in Birmingham, it is pretty difficult to get through the crowds, but anywhere else...
So how many bodyguards in your entourage?
Well, I think there were 3 or 4 there. Paul and I are both there, Paul Hollywood, and they just means you can get to your book signing. But
just to clarify, Mary, you have got 4 bodyguards.
They are there when I'm at a big event, but I don't have... I have my husband to look after me.
What sort of fan mail do you get? Do you get lots of...
Do you know, only this morning I had a big envelope sent me with lots and lots of letters in, and really mainly from children, saying what they made, what they did, and could they have a picture or whatever.
Any male admirers?
I get quite a few men who cook, but not saucy ones, no.
Never?
Not really, no.
You're a bit of a pin-up, Mary. I mean, I'm surprised by that.
I haven't really had any proposal. I have. I've had one proposal.
What was the proposal?
Of marriage. Oh, no, yes, of course, marriage.
Let's talk about your relationship with your co-judge, Paul Hollywood. You're both quite naughty, aren't you, with your double entendres that keep coming out?
No, he's naughty, I'm good.
Well, let's study this, because in Series 4, you said of Paul, he loves his buns.
Mm-hmm.
On another occasion, you said of whipped egg whites, there it is, looking beautifully stiff.
Mm. Yes, you see, Paul...
Now, are these deliberate, Mary?
No, it is. I promise you, it's not deliberate. And Paul always finds, he's rolling things into balls. We get trouble there. He will always find something saucy.
So he's the one with the filthy mind.
He is the one with the saucy mind. But it's good fun.
There wasn't an occasion when you were asked to judge a tea loaf where the key ingredient was hemp. You were quite surprised about this, I think.
That was Howard, and he made this tea loaf. And usually, when somebody cuts something in half, you smell it, and all I could smell was grass. And
did it take you back to your old student days, Mary?
No, it didn't take me back to my student days. It smelled grass, and I didn't quite know what it was, but I didn't like the smell. And I didn't like the taste, and this was huge amusement, particularly to Paul Hollywood and Mel. I can remember them laughing their heads off.
When you say you knew immediately it was grass, I suppose some people would be...
It tasted musty.
Because hemp is obviously from the cannabis plant, but grass is the kind of street lingo for it.
It was
it does suggest, Mary, you may have had a bit of experience with this.
I have.
Never had a crafty split?
No, I've never... Now, I have had a crafty split of tobacco, but not... anything stronger.
Never any cannabis?
No.
But you have smoked a crafty cigarette?
When I was, I suppose, about 8...
8?
Yeah. Or 10, I don't know. I was
this is getting good.
I was with my brothers, and we used to have goats as a child. It was in the war, and they were in a pen, and there was a little hut where the goats were, and my brothers and I used to go up and smoke there. And,
you were smoking cigarettes at 8 years old, Mary?
Only a bit of a try.
You see the halo slipping before my very eyes here. Anything else you want to get off your chest?
No, I didn't like it, I can tell you.
You've been on television, as I said, for 40 years, but there was a lull of about 15 years before this big show, and that was a time when male chefs began to dominate the airwaves. What did you make of that trend?
There was quite a long period when all chefs were male, and in all the shows. And I think then the chefs were very clever, and they have so many tips and hints. There's always things to learn.
What about when Gordon Ramsay's screaming abuse at people?
I don't like that.
You don't?
No, I don't. And I don't think there's any excuse for it. And I think if the young are watching, they'll think it's normal, and they can do it. I don't like it at all.
Would you like to be trapped on a desert island with Gordon Ramsay?
I'm told he's really a great chap, but he's going to swear at me. I'm not going. The doorbell rang, and there was a policeman there. And it's very strange. I knew something had happened.
You were born Mary Rosa Berry in Bath in 1935. You had one older brother, Roger, and a younger brother, William. Your mother, Marjorie, was the heart of the family. What did you mean by that?
It was as families used to be. If we were having meals, my father would be served first, and we were after him. He was sort of the leader of the house, and we had to do as we were told.
You were quite frightened of your father. He was obviously quite a tough disciplinarian.
My father was tough, and he didn't really give praise. Mind you, I didn't work very hard at school, so why should I have had praise?
When you were 14, you were struck down with polio, which was an absolute killer.
I went to the isolation hospital in Bath, and I was put in a room by myself, and that had glass either side, and my parents couldn't come and see me, and I could only see them through the glass, and that...
Terrifying.
It's terrifying. And I said to the nurse, "What's wrong with me?" And she said, "You've got infantile paralysis." I didn't even know what that was. And I knew I couldn't sit up. And I had a sort of a cup thing with a spout that they fed you through. All I can remember was being very frightened and wanting my mother, and of course she wasn't allowed in. It must have been awful for them.
Your dad, who, you know, as we say, could be slightly aloof, but he walked 4 miles from your home to bring you a surprise visitor. Do you remember that?
I do. I went, after I left the isolation hospital, I was in a ward where they had mainly TB, and TB people have to have fresh air. So the whole of the side of the ward was open, and Dad walked my pony to the... I was in the end bed, and I was able to stroke my pony.
4 miles he walked.
I know.
And we got a picture. Here is the pony. There we are.
Gosh, yes, I do remember that. It was very special, and that cheered me up no end.
You were discharged from hospital after nearly 3 months, and there's a photograph of you with your father that appeared in the local paper.
I had to put my left hand on the top of my head, something to do with the muscles here, but I was thrilled to be home.
He's looking at you very lovingly, isn't he?
I think he was quite relieved to have me safely home.
What do you feel when you look at that picture?
Oh, much love for my father.
What characteristics do you think you get from him?
Oh, I know one of them. If I'm doing a job, I have to finish it. I think that's a characteristic that I've inherited.
What were the long-term effects from the polio? Because you still have some side effects to this day, don't you?
Well, I get a hand that is a bit without muscles.
When you actually look at your hand, it is slightly...
It's sort of, it's just... and I had a muscle transplant to try and make that finger tuck underneath, but it doesn't matter a bit.
It doesn't affect any of the cooking, obviously, because you just plough on.
I plough on.
Mary, in the 60s, your career was taking off, and happiness in your personal life was the icing on the cake. In 1963, Mary met Paul Hunnings.
I said, would you like to come out on New Year's Eve or something? No, I'd love to, she said, but I'm getting engaged next week. So I struck her off the list. And then it was about 2 years later that we met up again.
Paul and Mary married in 1966. The couple were keen to start a family, but it wasn't going to be easy. Mary had a rare condition which meant she had 2 wombs.
Totally coincidentally, 3 of us that were friends had this same bicornate uterus, and you tend to lose babies.
Mary suffered 3 miscarriages, but thanks to the help of a Harley Street specialist, in 1968, Mary and Paul's first son, Thomas, was born in, quickly followed by William and Annabelle. Meanwhile, Mary's skills as a cookery expert have been brought to the attention of a television producer.
I was delighted that she came on my Monday programme. She did a programme on freezing, but she did so many other things.
Well, Mary Berry is going to show us a few easy and inexpensive dishes for one-ring cooking. Hello, Mary.
Hello, Judith.
She sounds terribly posh, and it's all in it, which I think was her voice at that time.
A good idea is to use the old hay box method. I say hay box method. Do you remember? Well, perhaps you weren't a Girl Guide.
I wasn't, actually.
Well, I was.
She was very relaxed.
And I'm not adding any water or milk to the omelette.
And she just sort of whipped something up.
Young people, they seem to like beans. So do grown-up fathers, if he's my husband.
Mary continued to juggle family life alongside her thriving career, even if it meant bringing her children to work.
It was a half-term, and we were saying, what are we going to do with the children? And she said, I know, why don't we bring them into the studio?
What are the general rules, Mary, when children are cooking in the kitchen?
I think, first of all, to choose something that the child will enjoy doing. It's not too difficult.
Annabelle made something with chocolate.
What do you like helping Mummy with in the kitchen most?
Jelly.
I think it was William who loved to make bread.
What do you like best about making it?
Thumping it.
In 1989, Mary and Paul's 3 children were starting out on their own career paths. William, their middle son, was studying at college in Bristol.
He was working well, had quite a few friends, always had a smile on his face, William did.
One weekend, William came home. He and his sister Annabelle went out in the car to get the newspapers.
And he hit the side of the road, and it turned over, and I think he broke his neck.
Went out one morning down the road, had a car accident, died. How can anyone handle that? I don't know.
William was just 19 years old.
I was in the car, and I think when you see something like that, you're not going to get over it overnight.
Mary was just totally shell-shocked. And I'll never forget, she walked around with the telephone clutched in her hand, as if maybe William was going to ring her, you know. It was just, oh, it was terrible.
William was a very loving brother, and it was a great shock, obviously, but you learn to live with the loss.
He is buried now in the local church. Every Sunday, Mary goes down and has a little prayer. I think it's taken her a long time to get over it, and she isn't over it now.
An absolutely awful tragedy for you and your family. That moment that you were told the news that William had died, it must have been the worst moment of your life.
Yes, I remember it well. It was a Saturday, and he'd nipped out to get the Times because it had a feature on business studies, and that's what he was studying in Bristol. And he went out with Annabelle, and it was a beautiful sunny morning, and he was coming back for lunch, and it must have been 1:30, 1:45, and he didn't come back. And the doorbell rang, and I went, and there was a policeman there. And it's very strange. I knew something had happened. He said, well, I'm afraid to say your son has died, and Annabelle is in High Wycombe Hospital. And I remember thinking then, I just hope Annabelle's all right. And so Paul came home and we went to the hospital. And I can remember endless corridors, and then all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a pink tracksuit and Annabelle running down the corridor, mud on her, but there she was, perfect. And, you know, I thought, well, we're very blessed that we've got Annabelle and Thomas, but we don't have William.
What kind of boy was William?
William was very devoted to both his big brother and particularly to Annabelle. We have so many wonderful memories and great happy times, and we were lucky really to have 2 other children. I mean, imagine if you have one child and you lose it. I mean, I think it brought us all terribly close together.
You obviously never get over something like that. I think that's just...
I don't think it's a case of getting over. You live with it. We all talk about him a lot, I mean, especially at sort of Christmas or birthdays. And our grandchildren, you know, see photographs of Will, and, you know, when they do quite well, they're doing well at sport at the moment, and they'll say, they're going to be a rugby player like Will. You know, he lives on in our memories.
You had a very poignant moment the day after William's death. You went down to your local parish church.
Just as you go inside, there's a plaque, a brass plaque, and it was the Busby family, and they lost, in the First World War, George, William and Frederick, one after another on different situations. And I can remember glancing at that and thinking, however did they get through that? We must get on with William.
When your children were all born, you decided to carry on working. I think you were back within 5 weeks after your first birth. That was a pretty controversial thing to do, wasn't it, at the time?
I knew that if I left my job, I don't think I'd have got it back. Well, at least I didn't have enough confidence to think they'd have me back. But I felt a bit guilty not being with them. But I really enjoyed what I did.
Your daughter Annabelle said that you weren't afraid to discipline your children if they got a bit naughty, and there was an implement of torture called the wooden butter pat, which apparently had a smooth side, which was when they were a bit naughty, and a rough side when they were very naughty. Mary.
Piers, you're absolutely right. And I used to have one upstairs. I'm a great corporal punishment in our house. One upstairs and one
wait a
downstairs.
minute. What is a wooden butter
pat? 2 pieces of wood, and on one side was smooth and ridges inside, and you got a lump of butter, and you went like that, which made ridges on balls of butter. And then you piled them in addition.
So you were making ridges on your children's flesh, is that right?
Yes, it was, absolutely.
And what did they have to do to deserve the soft butter pat?
Well, it was just how I was feeling, really. It just depended on how naughty they were. And remember, I had to catch them.
Minor indiscretions would be the soft side, but what would trigger the rough side, the one where you actually left imprints?
Oh, I think maybe taking something out of the fridge that I desperately needed for photography in a magazine or something. But half the time I couldn't catch them. They were little monkeys and they could run very fast.
Do you believe in, you know, smacking children and disciplining them? Do you think it toughens them up?
I don't think it hurts them too much, but I mean, I do think, it's quite jokey about these butter pats, but a quick slap on the legs.
I mean, Annabelle looks scarred to this day from the butter pat.
No, but I don't think it does.
When you pretended to bring one out, I could see her flinching over it.
I don't think it did any harm, really.
You once left your mother-in-law in charge of feeding Annabelle, and the meal didn't go quite according to plan, did it, Mary?
The boys were at school in Scotland, and we left Annabelle with my mother-in-law. We called her Mop, Granny Mop, and we had a dog called Wellington. And in those days, you didn't buy much tin meat for dogs. Our butcher used to cook down all the bits that are left over of meat. He'd cook it down for dog food. And I went down before going away with my husband and bought a block of this. And I wrapped it up and put it in the fridge. I also nipped to the butcher's and I roasted his chicken. I put that in the fridge. And so we went off. And I thought I'd explained everything to Granny Mop. I came home and she said, "We kept the chicken for you, and that meatloaf was delicious." And I thought of my little 4-year-old eating dog food.
Poor little Annabelle. I mean, she's not being whacked by your butter pat or whatever it's called. She's getting the dog food.
I was just seeing what was around.
How many other men were there? 5, 10, 20? Let's talk about relationships. Where did you meet your husband, Paul?
I met Paul, I think, at a dance. Yes, actually in Bath, because he was working in Bristol.
Was it love at first sight?
No, it wasn't love at first. We got on very well, but I had quite a life in London, you see, and so I used to see him at weekends, and then I'd see other people during the week.
Wow! Hang on a second.
Wait a minute, I was fancy-free.
Smoking at 8, seeing other men on the side. We're really chipping away at this halo, aren't we, Mary Berry?
But why shouldn't I? I mean,
Oh, absolutely no reason. I mean, did Paul know about these other men?
Well, why should he? I wasn't engaged.
So you were quite a naughty girl then, weren't you?
No, I wasn't naughty. I was just seeing what was around.
How many other men were there?
Not a lot. Not a lot.
4,
no.
5, 10? 20?
I don't know. It certainly wasn't 20, maybe about 2 or 3.
2 or 3? So you had,
yes.
Plus Paul, so that's 4 men you had on the run at the same time.
Yeah, well, good friends. Anyway.
How did he bat himself into contention with all these rivals?
Well, he kept asking me, and I kept saying, well, you know, I'll sort of think about it.
To marry you?
To marry me, yes. And then, in the end, I said, I thought, well, he really is very nice, and he's so kind. And I said, you better go and see Dad. And he drove over to see my father, and as he came in the drive, Dad was very fond of animals and birds and whatever. We had doves, white doves. And accidentally, Paul ran over a dove.
What? What, killed one?
He killed one.
Killed one of your dad's prized doves?
Yeah, that's right.
Before he'd even got to the question. So that...
And he killed the dove, and my father opened the double doors and said, "You silly twit." And so Paul was quite quick and thought, perhaps it's not quite the right moment. And so he sort of fumbled about and went. But he came back the following weekend, and Dad said, are you sure that you want to marry Mary?
Well, your father actually came up with a fantastic phrase. He said, she's very difficult and might have trouble conceiving. I mean, this is hardly the best sales pitch from your old man, is it?
Paul was very loving, and he said, I would like her whatever.
Is it true that while you were courting Paul, you didn't cook him a single meal?
Quite right, I did not.
Why?
Well, you know...
you were playing really hard to get, weren't you?
Well, I certainly didn't cook him a single meal, and he was awfully bad at looking after himself.
You are heartless, aren't you? Ruthless.
I've looked after him ever since I've married.
Do you think you've become the perfect wife after that rocky start where you refused to cook for him and saw all these other men on the side?
It's only you that say I don't have rocky start.
You've been married 47 years. What's the secret to a long-lasting, happy marriage, do you think?
Well, in our case, I think it is... I think we respect each other, and actually we don't row at all.
When you think back to the other 3 rivals that you could have picked... When you
I've got the right one.
Do you think you chose the right one?
Oh, I did.
Is he your best friend, would you say?
I would say he's my best and my closest friend. I'm immensely lucky, and actually, I love him more now than I ever did.
Yeah. Mary, let's find out how you became the Queen of British Baking. Born in 1935, Mary was the middle sister of 2 brothers.
Both Mary and I mean, we used to quarrel, obviously, as youngsters, and Father used to get fed up with this and say, if you don't shut up, I'll bang your heads together. If Father said jump, you jumped. That was the discipline in the family.
At school, Mary preferred the delights of making a treacle sponge pudding to academia.
She wasn't very good at school, but there was an occasion when she took home something she'd made, and her father said, Mary, this is as good as your mother's. And of course, you know, that was praise indeed.
And she says that's one of the catalysts of her thinking, actually, I can do this quite well.
After leaving school at 17, Mary went on to catering college. With a skill for knocking up a Victoria sponge, one of her first jobs was as an electric oven demonstrator.
You'd buy an electric oven, and then there was an offer that someone would come around and teach you how to make a Victoria sandwich on it. So that's what Mary used to do.
Despite failing English at school, Mary became a food journalist, working her way up to being cookery editor on Ideal Home magazine. This led to her TV debut in 1971.
Mary Berry, cookery editor. Thank you very much, Mary, for doing it for us.
You really need
Can I serve you to a spread? Yes,
And also, when they're in the vinegar for some time, it softens the bone, so you can eat the head, the tail, the whole lot.
But the first meal she cooked was far from conventional.
Shall we try the birds now? Sparrow.
To see her cooking with sparrows and cow's udders, that's what Heston Blumenthal does nowadays.
But you have to resist one.
This is for the cow's udder.
It certainly is a cow's udder.
But she was doing it first. She did it long before him.
I'm creaming together butter and sugar.
For over 5 decades, Mary's been teaching and inspiring the nation through her recipes.
Baking to me is an absolute nightmare. But if I follow Mary, it's step by step, and you can get it right. I finally got my Victoria sponge to rise.
That looks perfectly baked to me, and it's had its time.
Today, Mary's one of the country's most prolific cookery writers, with around 80 cookbooks to her name.
She's always popping in as #1 and #2 in the bestseller charts.
And Mary's recipe for success has meant she's now heading up a reported £15 million empire.
Mary's the queen of cakes. She's still going strong, and she's still doing everything, and she's appearing here, there and everywhere, and I really admire that.
But success doesn't come without determination.
She's very competitive. If you play a game with Mary, she's got to win.
People underestimate how hard she is, and she is hard. You don't get to the position where she is by being a softie. She is a tough woman, and if she wants something, Mary Berry will get it.
If Mary Berry wants something, she'll get it.
In the words of Paul Hollywood.
Yeah. So underneath this lovely, charming, polite exterior, you're quite ruthless, tough inside?
I don't think I am really tough. I think that if you want to achieve, you've really got to work at it. And I love what I do, but I want to do it really well.
Now, you've published 80 cookery books in your career, selling in the region of 8 million copies. That must have made you a lot of money.
The early cookery books certainly didn't. You see, when I did them for Hamlin, which was the biggest selling cookery book of its time...
Sold like 2.5 million copies,
yes,
isn't it?
and I got £189 per 50,000, which isn't a lot.
It's not. How far have your rates moved, Mary?
Oh, they're up now. Right up.
On the scale of wealth, are you stinking rich, very rich, well off?
I think that we're doing quite nicely and the bills are paid.
So stinking rich?
No, definitely not.
You're not supposed to be worth £15 million.
That is absolute rubbish, and I'd like to know where it is.
In the VT, we saw your first television appearance on a programme from 1971 called Collector's World. You had some interesting recipes there: sparrows, cow udder pie, ox's eyes and pike. Did you enjoy all that?
I can tell you, I was absolutely terrified of doing it. And the sparrows arrived in a plastic bag with their feathers on. And I really don't like dead birds.
Well, that's because isn't it because your brothers used to chase you with dead birds on sticks?
They did.
What is your recipe for cow udder pie?
I can tell you, you wouldn't want to eat it. I mean, udders are tough. It arrived on the kitchen table, and there we are with the 4 teats, and they're all floppy. And, you know, you feel a bit guilty poking the knife into it.
You also exacted terrific revenge on your brother Roger.
I did. He lived next door to my mother, and I snipped one off and popped it through his letterbox.
I was told that not long ago you partied literally until dawn in a nightclub in Ibiza. We've calculated that you have eaten 2,800 pieces of cake over 4 series of the Great British Bake Off. The crew on the show apparently gained an average of ½ stone. You should be the size of a house, but you're not. Why?
Well, Piers, when I'm tasting...
Because I want to know how I eat more cake and look like you.
When I'm tasting and judging, I am fair. And I taste every single cake, whether I fancy it, whether I don't. And then, every day, I have soup for lunch. Stop. And in the evening, Paul Hollywood and I usually have supper together, and I might have two first courses. And I'm pretty go-easy the next day.
Is it true that you're the same size as you were when you were 24?
I'm smaller.
You're smaller?
Yes. I'm littler inside.
And Mary Berry, you've become a national treasure. At the age of 78, Mary's influence has not only extended to baking, but also to fashion.
Mary is a style icon.
She looks so slim and she looks great.
Mary's now making headlines with the clothes that she wears.
The famous bomber jacket. Everyone went mad for it.
She takes some of Mel's clothes. Oh, quite like this. And she'll go out in it and everyone think, wow, and Mel goes, if I wear that, I don't get that sort of reaction. Welcome to the world of Mary Berry.
The icing on Mary's cake came in October 2012, when she received a CBE from Prince Charles at Windsor Castle.
I had to find out from someone else that she got it. This is typical Mary. She's very modest.
It's really amazing.
And the royal seal of approval didn't end there for Mary.
chocolate. I'm a very big fan of your cookbooks, too. And your cake was delicious.
Did you really have that? Yes, of course.
Apparently they do bake-offs and cook Mary's recipes.
Very, very nice to meet you. My wife is a big fan.
How wonderful for the future King and Queen of England to be a fan. I think she was very touched.
It's funny, to get everyone doing something together, isn't it? Turn the television off and do something as a family.
But turn it on again for the bake-off.
Of course.
Mary's biggest critic, though, is back at home.
I have always looked on cakes, comparing them with the ones that my mother used to make, and I regard them as being not quite up to the standard of my mother, but...
But thankfully, not all the family feel that way.
I love Granny this much. And I love her this much and a little bit more. I love Granny so much that my arms don't reach. We love our Granny this much.
Now, I'd love to dwell on that sweet moment at the end with your grandchildren saying how much they love you, but I'd rather go back a few seconds to the revelation from your husband that your cakes are nowhere near as nice as his mother's cakes.
Granny Mop did make good cakes.
Well, he particularly liked one she used to make with a jam icing and a jam filling.
Yes, he likes an awful lot of filling and not too much cake. And every time I make it, he says, not the same as Granny Mop.
I mean, that's, you know, I'm not saying you're going to have your first ever row, but this is a big moment, isn't it?
It just makes me laugh, really, and he's still not going to get it.
Does he ever criticise your cooking? Does he obviously he's been quite vocal there, but from the safety of a video where he's not actually in the room.
I'm very lucky to have a family because they're totally truthful.
They'll actually reject your
food.
food.
Oh, yes, and quite right, too.
Your husband Paul does that, does he?
Oh, Paul does, but, you know,
Oh, he's actually sent food back in the kitchen.
No, he wouldn't send it back, but he'd just say, next time, dear, I would if I were you.
Wow, really?
Yes, and also...
Next time, dear, I'd cook it a different way?
Yes, he does.
How did you feel when you saw the Duchess of Cambridge and the Duke there? Telling you what great fans they were.
I'm a patron of child bereavement charity, and they came to see the new offices and what we do, and well, I was chuffed to bits.
I mean, Kate actually buys your books and does the recipes.
Yes,
she's cooking the future King of England your recipes.
Well, that's good. But the thing, when I came back, there were pictures in the local paper, and my husband said to me, "Were the Duke of Cambridge and Kate on a platform?" And I said, "No, they're just very tall and I'm very short."
You're also invited to lunch at Buckingham Palace, and Prince Philip told you he's a keen cook. Do you know what his speciality is?
He's very keen on barbecuing. And, you know, I sort of thought, is he really keen? And then he was saying, well, at Sandringham we shoot a lot and we have several birds. And he said he stuffed the birds with haggis, but he had to add a little bit of extra breadcrumb because haggis is fatty into the stuffing. And I thought, he knows his onions, does the Duke.
Your mother died at the ripe age of 105. By my calculation, that means we've got probably 27 more years of Mary Berry. Can you imagine retiring, or are you just going to keep steaming on?
I haven't even thought about it. I absolutely love what I do, and I consider myself really fortunate.
I was told that not long ago you partied literally until dawn in a nightclub in Ibiza.
We went for a friend's son's wedding in Ibiza, a crowd of us, and of course all the girls, we're quite young at heart, shall we say, wanted to go to Pasha. And none of our...
Pasha's one of the trendiest nightclubs in Europe.
Yes, well, you can imagine that the chaps were not happy about that. And the thought of my husband going up the steps and they stamp you. The last thing that Paul wanted to be stamped on the steps. And it is like a rabbit warren of lots of little rooms. And well, I found it quite exciting, but you could get lost in there. And it was so noisy.
Have you been clubbing since? Or?
No.
Finally, Mary, if you could compare yourself to a cake, which one would you choose and why?
What a very strange comparison.
Thank you.
Well, my favourite cake is lemon drizzle cake. Why? Because it is very simple to achieve, following easy instructions, and the whole family will love it.
A bit like this interview, I suspect, Mary. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Mary Berry is the Queen of Cakes and a national treasure.
I'd go for that.
I'm a little bit worried of what he's going to delve into.
She's been on television for 4 decades and she's at the top of her game.
I bet he asked me about Bake Off, and do I love Bake Off? I really do. It's delicious.
Mary's had an extraordinary life. She was a real trailblazer for female chefs.
A good idea is to use the old hay box method.
The most difficult part of this interview will definitely be surrounding the death of her son at 19 in a road accident.
We miss William enormously. I'd love him to walk in the room right now.
I'm not buying all this nice Mary Berry stuff. I think it's going to be quite a frisky night.
Piers, this is very, very exciting to come on your show, and please be very gentle with me.
Mary Berry, I've had lots of big stars on this show. I don't think I've ever had a goddess like you, somebody at the top of their game. How do you feel about this national treasure status that you've now suddenly got?
Well, I feel just the same inside, but I'm very lucky and I'm very spoiled.
For someone like me who's never even baked a potato, why is Britain so mad about baking?
I think because the programme, The Great British Bake Off, is very simple, and it's very, very honest, and all the bakers are amateurs. They've never baked professionally. They've never been in a tea shop even cooking cakes. So they're like the girl or the boy next door.
Now, most of the people we interviewed for the programme said that it's your disappointment on Bake Off that the contestants fear the most. One journalist described your devastatingly withering look of disappointment as, quotes, able to instantly reduce any human being alive to a pile of quivering ash.
I think that's a bit tough.
Imagine just for a moment, I've just baked a cake, and it's one of the worst
I'm imagining it, because you wouldn't have baked a cake, would you?
Well, I wouldn't have a clue. But imagine that I had. Let's suspend all disbelief for a moment.
Yeah.
And you're looking at it, and it's the worst cake you've ever seen, and then you taste it, and it's even more diabolical. Give me that look of disapproval. Wow. It's wounding.
I can usually find something nice, because one doesn't want to put people off cooking and baking. You want to tell them where they've gone wrong and encourage them to do better.
Now, Mary, in a recent list of best-dressed people over 50, you came second only to Dame Helen Mirren. You beat Barack Obama, David Bowie and the Queen. How does it feel to be a style icon for the older generation?
Must have been on a very good day. Actually, because of the Bake Off, I think there's often, with the master classes, I suppose there must be about 18 lots of outfits, and actually I quite enjoy choosing them. But I've got one or two things that are important to me because I'm old. I make quite sure I have a sleeve, so we don't see these wobbly bits here.
And don't you also keep them cut so that you don't get the flour on? Is that right?
A little bit back, yes.
Yeah.
And I don't like it too low, and definitely not too short.
Now, tell me about the infamous floral bomber jacket. There we are. I mean, that is sensational.
And the reason why I bought that, Piers, was because I could get lots of jumpers underneath, because we film when it's very cold down in Somerset.
And do you remember what you paid for it?
I think it was something like £29 or something.
£29.99. Apparently, it's now selling for £200 on eBay after you wore it. Mary, let's take a look at how you've tempted the nation with your cooking for over 40 years.
I'd go for that.
A splash of sweetness.
It's delicious, absolutely delicious. Thank you.
A generous measure of honesty.
Forgive me being rude, but it looks a bit like a stuffed olive.
And lashings of experience has made Mary Berry the queen of British baking.
Mary's a real proper cook. And wow, she's got the whole nation interested in baking.
There'll certainly be through to the next round.